The clock is chiming in the background.
Yeah, we are live.
Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting for November. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones and do not make or receive calls while the meeting is in progress. This meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will subsequently be available on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? The following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure 20.1. Item 6, Councillor Davis. Item 10, Councillor Bayford. Item 11, Councillor Garner. And item 12, Councillor Pugh. Any other members wish to speak under 20.1? Councillor Scobie.
Agenda item 6, please, Chair.
Councillor Austin.
Agenda items 6 and 8, please, Chair, and apologies from Councillor Garner, who can't be here after all. Sorry.
Okay. 6 and 8. You don't wish to speak on his behalf on the Broadstairs neighbourhood plan review? Okie doke. Right, members, we're all here, so there can't be any apologies. Thank you. Does anyone have any declarations of interest in the items of business on the agenda this evening? No, thank you. Item 3, to approve the summary and recommendations and decisions of the Cabinet meeting held on the 19th of October. I propose we take the minutes as read. Do I have a seconder? Yep. Councillor Yates, thank you. And we'll move on to the first substantive item, which is item 4, the Budget Monitoring Report number 2, 2023-24. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. I present the second Budget Monitoring Report to Cabinet for its consideration and approval. The key financial messages are that our general fund net revenue spending is forecast to be approximately £1.2 million over budget, which is largely due to an anticipated overspend on temporary accommodation for homelessness and a shortfall against some of our income streams. Just want to mention that overspend is not at all unusual this time of year, and this does not raise any serious concerns about the Council's finances as a whole. Furthermore, our key financial messages are that all budgets will continue to be regularly monitored to ensure the Council's expenditure remains, wherever possible, within the agreed budget. In our housing revenue account, I'm pleased to report that we are forecasting a £1.4 million surplus against the budget, which is mainly due to better returns on our HRA investment balances and reduced debt charges. Section 6.5 and 6.6 of the report also set out some recommended changes to our capital programme, including increasing the budget for disabled adaptations in our residents' homes following the receipt of additional external funding. I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Is there a seconder? Councillor Whitehead. Members, any comments on the budget report? Very unusual not to have any 20.1 speakers on a budget report. Okay, members, is the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, the mid-year review 2023-24 Treasury Management and Annual Investment Strategy. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. Following on from the review of our budget position, this report gives a mid-year update on how we've managed our cash balances, investments and borrowings over the same period. The regulatory environment places responsibility on members for the review and scrutiny of Treasury management policy and activities. This report is important in that respect as it provides details of the 23-24 mid-year position for Treasury activities. The key items to consider are that we have maintained our internal borrowing strategy, where we are using our own cash holdings to finance our capital spending plans, rather than taking on external borrowing. For instance, our need to borrow to finance our capital expenditure is estimated to be £78.3 million at 31st of March 2024. However, our actual gross debt at 30th September 2023 was £19.7 million. Despite utilising a proportion of our cash balances for our capital expenditure needs, at 30th September 2023, the Council's investment balance was still high at £55.4 million. There are two changes to our Treasury management strategy that are recommended for Cabinet's approval, which is set out at Section 3 of the report. It is proposed that both our operational boundary and our authorised limit for borrowing be increased by £20 million to reflect the increase in the 2023-24 HRA capital programme for the acquisition and development of new affordable housing units. I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Is there a seconder? Councillor Duckworth. Members, any comments? No. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Move on to item 6, the External Auditor's Annual Audit Report on Value for Money. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. Each year, the Council's external auditor is required to report its audit findings from its audit of the accounts to the Governance and Audit Committee, which Grant Thornton will present at the committee meeting on the 29th of November. However, this year, due to the fact that this report covers 3 years rather than 1, it is also being brought to the attention of Cabinet for noting. The report on value for money covers the 3 years from 2020. I'll rephrase. The report on the value for money covers 3 years, 2020 to 21, 21 to 22, and 22 to 23. It therefore covers a period in the Council's history of significant upheaval and revisions to its senior leadership and governance arrangements. It would be fair to say the report concludes that the first 2 of these 3 years were a period in which the necessary steps were being taken to identify and address the problems. The last of those years, 22 to 23, is a period in which significant progress has been made to resolve the problems. And I'm glad to report in relation to the working groups, which are mentioned in 1.16 of the report, that significant progress is being made on a property working group, a governance working group, and a project management working group. The details of progress and the process that has and is being made are set out in the report. Therefore, I ask Cabinet to consider and note the Auditor's annual report and to comment on and endorse the management action. The next steps are for this report to pass to the G&A Committee for further consideration, where a representative from Grant Thornton will attend the committee meeting and present the key findings. I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. A seconder, Councillor Alban, and speaking under 20.1, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The issue that I'd like to not particularly raise, but I think we need to keep in the forefront of our observation, and I welcome a lot of the positive news here, and thank God we finally moved forward in 3 years of waiting. I must confess to be one of those that objected to the item in the accounts that I'm about to refer to, and guess what? It's berths 4 and 5, page 13 in the auditor's report. Still outstanding work going on, but I would like to bring to Cabinet's attention a couple of points in that there are various references to overpayments being made and a need for audit on those and compensation required if necessary. The whole contract situation needs to be reviewed, I believe, and in the Grant Thornton report it does state that there's a need for an immediate action on this. Given the amount of projects that are ongoing and, for instance, the levelling up projects, which obviously there's quite a lot of shift on and so on and a lot of difficulty delivering, could I have Cabinet or certainly portfolio holders confirmation that these recommendations will be implemented, monitored and monitored ongoing on an immediate basis, because we have no time to wait for this. And as the auditor's report clearly says, if we carry on as we are, we're going to keep making the same mistakes. Thank you.
Councillor Yates, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. So I want to focus just on the project management side. It has been identified within the auditor's report about project management being an issue. That is one of the working groups that has now been set up within the council, and these are led by the senior directors in the council in order to address some of the issues raised in these audit reports. A bit of context, I think, is needed on the levelling up and town deal monies, is that this was an extremely rapid announcement for the council to react to. So I don't think it's too surprising that local councils need to react very quickly. And I think we're doing exactly what's required by setting up this project management working group. But I'm happy to feed back to officers, Chris Blundell, if he can step in and comment on a few of those points as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. A couple of points there that you've raised in relation to that recommendation. Taking them in turn, the project management item, as Councillor Yates has referred to in his introduction, we are making progress. We're setting up a number of those working groups. Some of them have already met, and we're establishing the terms of reference for those groups to address the recommendations that have been made here, also in the work of the internal auditors and also previous reports by the external auditors as well and the independent monitoring officer. All that's been woven together to make sure we are addressing those concerns that have been raised around project management and our overall approach to governance to make sure that's as tight as it needs to be. In terms of the issues relating to the contract management, that's right. So it was an area that was identified as a whistleblowing concern that was raised to our internal audit team. That was further investigated by management, where we identified that there had been overpayments in relation to a particular service that was out to contract. We've been able to recover that money. We took the appropriate action to report that through our regular fraud reporting channels. It's also worth noting that the service area in relation to planned maintenance, where this overpayment was identified, was subject to follow-up as part of the standard internal audit process. And the overall opinion, provided that service had increased from limited to reasonable, no assurance to reasonable assurance, which is quite a rapid increase and a remarkable turnaround to show actually our controls are robust in that area. That said, note the concerns around whether there could be, and there hasn't been identified, but the auditors have put on record concerns that there could be a wider incidents of overcharging, and we will look to investigate that and make sure that our controls are as tight as they need to be. But at this stage, we haven't undertaken that work because it's a risk that's been identified by the internal auditors that we are still currently investigating.
Thank you, Chris. That's extremely encouraging, if I can say so, because obviously there are still a lot of ongoing concerns. Perhaps we could have a conversation about one or two items that members of the public have identified or stakeholders, but now isn't obviously the time. But thank you, and thank you, Rob. Very encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Scobie?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to speak about issues related to internal audit that have been raised by the external auditor. I'm grateful to Councillor Yates for coming along to G&A meetings. I think that's been really beneficial for members to know that Cabinet members there and listening to concerns, and also to you, Leader, for ensuring that this matter is discussed at Cabinet. It's a new Governance and Audit Committee, and we're still getting to grips with some of the challenges. And one of the things that has come up consistently in the last two agendas and meetings before that is that we have had consistently low or no assurance given to some service areas coming out from internal audit, which is obviously a concern. And more recently, that's covered some really meaty areas like health and safety and equalities. Now, the committee's had assurance that these areas are being looked at and some of the management controls are good. But one of the things I would like to understand is how we're going to tackle some of those challenges. I would also be interested in whether we might need to adjust the audit plan for the next 18 months, because if we are seeing that there's consistently service areas coming in with limited or no assurance from the ones that are being done, it may suggest that there are other areas that do not have potentially the correct management controls in place or following the right process. Audit's a lagging indicator, and I will say that the most recent tranche, which is going to the committee in about a week's time, is much more positive. I think there was only one area that had a partial limitation around section 106, but the committee will look at that. I would quite like at that meeting to give reassurance to members that the Cabinet are moving on this. And then there was just one other small issue, which is there's a recommendation that internal audit themselves should be audited. Who's auditing the auditors? So it would be good to get some thoughts on whether that might be able to be achieved in 2024 or not, because again, I think that would give, particularly after the rocky road of the last few years, some assurance that governance is going back on track. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie, and I'm sure if the Chief Exec was able to be here this evening, he would offer you some words of comfort in terms of his focus on dealing with some of these outstanding issues. But Councillor Yates, you want to come in?
Yep, and thanks for the questions, Councillor Scobie. So I'll just return to what I mentioned briefly in the intro, which is following on from this audit, separate working groups are coming up. Clause 1.16 of the report mentions these different working groups. One of these is the governance working group. So the terms of reference of that working group has been sent around to the officers. Their first meeting will be in the coming weeks, and that will be addressing some of the points raised at the G&A meeting. I know from personal experience of being on G&A that you can get a situation where it could be like Thanet Lotto, for example, got low assurance a few years ago. And I totally understand the position that G&A is on, which is how can we, as a committee, get assurance that these items are being closed off and not just turning up to the next meeting where there's new audit findings. So we are taking that on board, and that will, I believe, be discussed within that governance working group, and it's something that I'm taking on board with the officers for future reports. Onto health and safety, as you brought that up, I just want to highlight that following the low assurance on health and safety, this has been brought up in an internal meeting within Cabinet and senior officers, and we will be getting a further follow-up report in February on that. I don't know what the next steps will be from that, but it'd be something that we'd be keen to provide feedback on, to be transparent, following the next, I believe in February is actually the deadline for us to feed back to the audit, so once that feedback's provided, I'm sure that's something we can provide to councillors to show progress on. Who audits the auditors? It's a good question. I'll refer to our section 151 if that's okay on that question. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got to be careful my choice of words, the response on this one. First and foremost, I think it's really important to stress how highly I regard the work of East Kent Audit Partnership. And actually, if you look through the substance, if you look at the substance of some of the themes that are picked out in this report, Grant Thornton have actually been very favourable in terms of the view they've given of the work of internal audit. So I think it's a bit harsh, the recommendation they've made is a bit overly critical, that they're saying to ensure that internal audit are meeting the right standards. You can get an external body to come in and review whether your independent internal audit function is doing as it should do. I don't have any concerns that it isn't, but I can understand why members may wish to receive that level of assurance. I think it would be more of a concern if you were receiving a lot of reports from internal audit which saying there's nothing to see here, everything is substantial and reasonable assurance, but you actually had concerns about the way the service is being run. That, for me, would say you need to get someone to look at the work they're doing and assess the quality. The fact that you're getting very frank and straightforward advice from the internal audit service, to me, suggests that there's not really a problem here that would be uncovered as part of an independent review, but nonetheless, it's something that I've got no qualms or concerns about us undertaking.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on the report as a whole, that most particularly about the governance, which is an area that I've personally been very involved in and that we have as a Green Group. And we know the huge amount of work that's gone on here, and we're immensely grateful for it, and we do think there have been very considerable improvements. However, we are well aware that it's still a work in progress, and speaking as a member of the Scrutiny Committee, I'm delighted that this administration has committed itself to a level of transparency that I haven't been familiar with before in terms of bringing everything to scrutiny. However, there are still areas, particularly around project management, which concern us, and where we've been asking, the Chair has been asking for reporting, and that for one reason or another has not happened on a regular basis to scrutiny in the way that we had hoped. And that's a concern, that there's been pushback that we haven't been able to have some of the reporting that we had hoped for. Simple project management reporting, red, amber, green type reporting, not something that should require a lot of extra work from officers, but areas that we have been concerned about. And I'm quite happy to follow that up with an email if that's helpful. But I know that the Chair of Scrutiny has already raised that. The other thing that surprises me about this report, not being familiar with these types of reports, is the covering report is actually quite positive and encouraging. And when you deal with the detail of the internal audit report, there's a lot of very positive things in it. And yet the executive summary is, it looks really negative. It looks that we're actually getting worse, or at least we were getting worse at the point at which that the papers were available for the internal auditors. And I'm just interested in Councillor Yates's comments on that and what he thinks the picture will look like on the executive summary for the current year. Thank you.
Yeah, it is necessarily a very backward-looking document, of course, and I actually found it really useful as an overview of what had gone on over a period of time. Councillor Yates.
Yep, and thank you, Councillor Austin, for your questions. So project management concerns, as highlighted already, we do have the project management working group, which has already been set up, had their first meeting. I can highlight that a new officer to support with a project management framework is due to start imminently to support officers. And as reiterating what I said previously, I think the levelling up town deal monies coming to this council without, I think it's fair to say, without a large amount of forward notice, does require us to kind of catch up on some of these things. So, and as part of that, this council's signed up to the Pathfinder project, which means that we no longer have all these separate boards meeting and taking up a lot of time and bureaucracy. That we've streamlined that process so that we can reduce the level of bureaucracy and get these projects moving. I agree with you about the RAG reporting, and that's something that we would like to see as well. So that's just a bit of a highlight, a bit of a response on the project management. We are heading in the right direction. On the executive summary, what prediction would I hope to see? Well, it's for the internal auditors to give their review, and I don't really want to estimate what they will be saying. But I think, given the incredible amount of work given by this Colin Carmichael, our chief exec, and the senior officers into taking this issue very, very seriously, the working groups, as I've mentioned, being set up, I believe that in a year's time we'll be looking at a much more positive report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yates, and I'm sure, Councillor Austin, you'll let us have an email in specific terms about what you're talking about scrutiny. Obviously, it's a bit difficult for Cabinet to comment on what can and can't go to scrutiny, because scrutiny isn't accountable to Cabinet. But I'm sure that there are some specific challenges that you'll highlight, and we'll be able to get the officers to respond to you on that. Members, anything further to add to this item? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Yates, your show goes on with the NDR discretionary relief policy.
Thank you, Leader. I present in this report a revised business rates discretionary relief policy and decision-making process for approval. Local businesses are currently able to apply for discretionary relief to alleviate the burden of business rates in certain circumstances. The proposal in this report is to streamline and amalgamate these existing policies in this area and create 2 volumes for the overall discretionary relief policy. Volume 1 will be containing the discretionary release that local authorities are effectively obliged to award to businesses, and Volume 2 covering what can be considered true discretionary relief. This policy will make the overall policy position much clearer, more transparent for applicants, and easier to update when the government either removes a relief or announces a new relief scheme. I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Is there a seconder? Councillor Keane. Members, do you wish to discuss the discretionary rate relief policy? Apparently not. Okay. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. Okay, extension to the Alcohol Public Space Protection Order, item 8, and it's Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Leader. This report recommends a 9-month extension to the Public Spaces Protection Order, or PSPO, which regulates alcohol consumption in our district. The PSPO has been in place since 2017 and was renewed in 2020. It was introduced to tackle antisocial behaviour and public disorder related to alcohol consumption in public places and was requested by Kent Police. This includes street drinking, public intoxication and disturbances caused by alcohol-related activities. The PSPO has been successful in reducing these issues and improving the safety and well-being of the community. Since the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, there has been an increase in the number of people gathering in public places. This has led to more incidents of antisocial behaviour and public disorder related to alcohol consumption over the last 3 years. Since January 2023, the police have issued 23 fixed penalty notices under the alcohol PSPO. The PSPO also allows alcohol to be confiscated and disposed of without the need for a fixed penalty notice to be issued. Education and communication are also key to reducing such instances and their occurrence. The recommended short-term extension of 9 months to this PSPO will synchronise the expiry of the order with that of the existing antisocial behaviour PSPO. It is likely that a new combined antisocial behaviour and alcohol PSPO will be drafted and applied for prior to 31st of July 2024. During this time, officers in the Community Safety Team will continue to monitor the effectiveness of the order and assess the potential for any necessary adjustments to ensure it remains an effective tool in regulating alcohol consumption in public places. The team will also continue to work closely with the police and other partners to ensure consistent enforcement of the order. The Council is committed to creating a safer and healthier community for all our residents and visitors. Extending the PSPO will support this goal and combat the antisocial behaviour and public disorder in our public spaces for the benefit of all. I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Alban. And speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. I thoroughly support this and I think it has had a beneficial effect, but certainly in Ramsgate Town Centre, as officers and members involved there know, we have still quite a serious problem with street drinkers. Many of those people are known to the police and to our officers, and we don't seem to be seeing any progress in the support that those people are getting. And I know we asked Ms Taylor a lot of questions about this at scrutiny, and we've had various discussions out of committees as well, and we know that the police are mostly trying to work on a basis of education, etc., and it's not that we want them to leap in with draconian punishments, but I am concerned that we need in some way to beef up what we're doing where we have problem street drinkers, and I would be interested in Councillor Keane's comments on how we might do that in the next PSPO, the next iteration of this, where it links in with antisocial behaviour. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Keane.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Austin. Yes, I agree, there are still problem areas, very much so, and in actual fact, coming into the council buildings last night, there was a whole group outside. I think it is a multifaceted problem, and it's worked on by lots of agencies, the RISE team, Forward Trust, our own community safety team. So it's ongoing with those efforts, as well as, of course, the police. And I think it's quite nice that we're combining the two policies at the next thing, and that this pause, you know, the 9-month, gives us time to really look at where the problem areas are and what actions we can take to address them. So I don't have any immediate answers, but I do think this time will be a good time to reflect on that. And if anyone else has any suggestions, I'd be happy to discuss it with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Any other comments from members? Councillor Alban?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Spookily enough, this morning I had at lunchtime I was having a meeting, and Mr. Geddes was part of that. And we were meeting with the town councils and parish councils representatives. And this matter came up, especially came up in Ramsgate. The town clerk of Ramsgate raised it, especially in Charlotte Square, where there are a number of people congregating. The police are aware of it. I have to say that reading, when you read about in item 1, the alcohol control in public space, it gives you to believe that in section A that says, to not consume alcohol or anything the authorised person reasonably believes to be alcohol is sealed or unsealed vessels. That gives you the view that no alcohol can be drunk. But effectively the police will not take action unless the person suffering from that alcohol is causing disturbance, causing offence to anybody else within the area that they're drinking in. So I think whilst I fully support this, I think it's something we need to look at when the joint PSPO comes forward next year. And I think we need to do that obviously in conjunction with the police to find out exactly what they're going to do, how they're actually going to enforce this, and our other officers who will, as part of the community team, will be. So I just wanted to make that point, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. And I mean, it's something we're all aware of, I think, and we see around the district, particularly in the centre of Ramsgate and the centre of Margate. So I'm sure that we will want to consider how we can make changes in the revised PSPO to improve the situation, because obviously it's not just when it gets out of hand, it makes people feel uncomfortable, I think, because they don't know quite what's going on around them and what to expect. So it is something that we need to address as a council insofar as we're able. Members, any further discussion? Okay, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We move on to item 9, which is the purchase of 5 homes at Reading Street, Broadstairs for affordable rent. And Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. Tonight, Cabinet is being asked to agree to, firstly, the purchase of 5 new affordable homes using the additional capital budget approved by Council at its meeting on the 12th of October 2023, and secondly, the letting of these homes in accordance with the Council's allocations policy at an affordable rent as set out in the Council's tenancy strategy. In July this year, Council approved an accelerated affordable rented housing development programme of at least 400 new homes, constructed or acquired by 2027. As a potential addition to this programme, officers have been contacted by Millwood Homes, who are required to deliver 5 new affordable homes as part of their development at Reading Street, Broadstairs. This requirement is set out in the Section 106 obligations for the development. They have been unable to secure an affordable housing provider to deliver these homes. As the homes have been designated as affordable homes in the planning consent and Section 106 agreement, they have been designed specifically for that purpose and accordingly are considered appropriate for the HRA in line with the needs of households on the Council's register or those living in temporary accommodation. There is a significant level of need for 1-bedroom homes as well as for larger family homes. It is proposed that the new homes are let in accordance with our adopted allocations policy. The purchase of these homes is part of our accelerated housing delivery strategy, ensuring that Section 106 homes are delivered and that the affordable housing that we are entitled to as part of developments comes to fruition and does not disappear when this is the housing that we need above all else. As this is a revenue strategy, it has already been established that the HRA will benefit from these acquisitions in year 13. The capital cost for these properties is £800,000, with £50,000 provided for associated costs. This provides 1 one-bed flat, 1 two-bed flat, and 3 three-bed houses. Very importantly, this provides social housing in an area of Thanet that is often inaccessible for renters. Property and rental costs in Broadstairs are significant, and acquiring genuinely affordable housing within Broadstairs is often challenging. Ensuring that all of our isle is accessible to residents is incredibly important, and local individuals and families should be able to remain where their local connections are. Acquisitions such as this support that aim. Thank you to Ms Jackson for her work relating to this proposal. In an ever-increasing property market, being able to deliver genuinely affordable properties that would otherwise have been lost is essential, and being able to deliver them in an area that is often harder to access for those on lower incomes is incredibly important. I move the recommendation set out in the report and am more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane. I'd just like to say how encouraging it is to see these further proposals coming forward, and although it's a small number of properties in this case, as you say, it's in an unusual area for us to be able to create new affordable homes, so that's particularly good news. And I thank the officers for their work in bringing forward these proposals. We look forward to more of them. Anybody else got anything to say? No? Councillor Yates?
Yeah, just echo what you've said, Leader, and just highlight under 2.5 of the report, it's even more optimistic saying that between year 13 and year 50 of this will be producing cash flow surpluses to the council. So this is a long-term project which is going to have long-term benefits to the council and our residents. Thanks.
Thank you. Members, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And we move on to item 10, which is the Local Authority Housing Fund Round 2, which is Councillor Whitehead again.
Seconds out, round 2.
Thank you, Leader. This report recommends that Cabinet approves the use of £694,000 of grant funding and £788,860 of HRA match funding from the already approved HRA Capital Programme to purchase 5 units for the LAHF Round 2. Members will remember that this is a grant that we have considered before. In the first tranche we applied for and were granted £1.19 million to provide homes for those who arrived in the country via the following approaches: the Afghan Citizen Resettlement Scheme, including eligible British nationals under this scheme, otherwise known as ACRS, Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy, ARAP, the Ukraine Family Scheme, Homes for Ukraine, and the Ukraine Extension Scheme. In March this year, it was announced that the Local Authority Housing Fund would be expanded by £250 million for a second round of funding. Thanet has been identified as eligible for capital grant funding with an indicative allocation of £694,000. This is to purchase 4 homes for the resettlement element and 1 home for the temporary accommodation element. Like LAHF Round 1, this is a match-funded grant. In order to use this round, it is necessary to match fund the acquisitions with £788,860 of borrowing within the HRA Capital Programme. The properties have been identified and must be purchased by the 31st of March 2024. For every housing acquisition, we complete business plan modelling. The modelling for this grant scheme shows that the scheme generates a surplus from year 1 due to the grant subsidy, which allows these homes to immediately support further investment in the Affordable Homes Programme. It is proposed that we let these homes at a genuinely affordable rent in line with our approved tenancy strategy. Discussions have taken place with the local developer currently developing the Westwood Cross site to purchase 5 times 3-bed units. These units will be an off-the-shelf purchase with no refurbishments or adaptations needed. They are nearing completion and will be ready soon. The developer has accepted a provisional offer subject to approval of £1.4 million. This amount is equivalent to 80% of market value. As with the previous tranche of funding, the timescales around this are extraordinarily tight. In order to deliver the homes required in the period given, direct purchase is the only realistic way forward. As members will know, this aspect of funding frustrates me hugely as it limits our creativity in provision, but the net result remains the same, namely that we can support those who need our support at an incredibly difficult time for the allotted time that they are allowed to remain by central government, and not only grow our general portfolio, but also support the growth of our housing overall. These homes are significant not just in what they can achieve in supporting those who have experienced war and displacement, but also in what they can do to support other vulnerable residents. Due to the scale of this grant and its provision of 46% of the overall cost, the rental of these properties produces a surplus from year one, as demonstrated by the provided graph. This is especially significant as part of our strategy, as it provides a revenue stream to not only offset borrowing to produce the 400 plus properties we are producing for general usage, but also to support further housing acquisition and production. It is exceedingly rare that both moral and financial benefits align. This is one of those rare cases. Life often calls on us to do the right thing for others. This moral imperative runs through every decision that we make as a council and is especially pertinent here. But to be able to provide for even more residents, specifically through fulfilling our moral duty, is a circumstance that rarely appears in local government, but this strategy allows it. A huge thank you to Ms Jackson for all her work on this. I move the recommendation set out in the report and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Yates. And speaking under 20.1, Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Leader. Just like a little bit of clarification, not just about round two, but round one as well. But that's what's before us today. In the event of one of our Afghan or Ukrainian families terminating tenancy within 3 years, would it then be offered to another family? And would that be for another possible 3 years? Or would until termination of tenancy, would that then go back to our housing list?
So, thank you. Thank you for the question. So in relation to both rounds of funding, which I think is what you're asking for, the grant conditions, as far as I'm aware, require us to use it for as long as we have need within those particular populations. So if, for instance, we did not have any families that would qualify for support under these programmes, then that property could then be used within general usage. The 3 years relates to the amount of time that central government has allotted to those individuals in terms of being able to stay here. I think in the case of war and displacement, it's a very difficult thing to do, to put a time limit on it, and I'm confused that that has happened. But unless central government guidance changes on how long people are allowed to stay, that's why that 3 year limit is there. So it won't be a perpetually extended 3 year limit, which I think is what you were wondering about. It relates specifically to the amount of time granted under these schemes.
So, can I just come back?
Yep.
What I mean is, if it then went to a second family, would it then be another 3 years and possibly another 3 years after that?
No, because it's within, these schemes are related to a particular block of time linked to particular conflicts. So central government has given 3 years.
So it isn't the individual, it's...
No.
No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy to pass back to Mr. Porter. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Members, any other comments? Right, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We'll move on to item 11, which is the adoption of the Broadstairs and St Peter's Neighbourhood Plan Review, which is me. Under the Localism Act 2011, neighbourhood plans can be prepared by local communities and are led by town or parish councils or a neighbourhood forum in areas which do not have a town or parish council. If Thanet Council adopts a neighbourhood plan, it would have the same significance as other development plan documents, for example, the local plan for the district. Broadstairs and St Peter's Town Council has reviewed its neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan review has been examined by an independent examiner and progressed to referendum as agreed by Cabinet on the 10th of August. The referendum took place on the 26th of October and the result was that 2,268 people voted for the neighbourhood plan and 279 voted against it. As more than half of those who voted in favour of the neighbourhood plan, the plan now comes into force as part of the development plan and the council must formally make meaning adopt the plan within 8 weeks of the date of the referendum. This review of the neighbourhood plan supersedes the Broadstairs and St Peters neighbourhood plan adopted in 2021. I therefore propose the recommendations as set out in the report, that is, that Cabinet recommends to a meeting of the full Council that Thanet District Council makes the Broadstairs and St Peters neighbourhood plan review. Is there a seconder? Councillor Keane, seconded. Members, any discussion? No? Okay, is that agreed? Thank you. And we move on to item 12, which is the adoption of the Birchington neighbourhood plan. Birchington Parish Council has prepared a neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan has been examined by an independent examiner and progressed to referendum as agreed by Cabinet on the 10th of August. The referendum took place on the 26th of October. The result was that 2,084 people voted for the neighbourhood plan and 174 voted against it. As more than half of those who voted in favour of the neighbourhood plan, the plan now comes into force as part of the development plan, and the council must formally make, meaning adopt, the plan within 8 weeks of the date of the referendum. I therefore propose the recommendations as set out in the report, that is, that Cabinet recommends to a meeting of the full council that Thanet District Council makes the Birchington neighbourhood plan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Alban. Councillor Pugh, speaking under 20.1.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, I suppose, add to this that I really welcome this coming to Cabinet. I think that it's been an incredibly long process, much delayed, admittedly not by anything that this council has done, but by delays with the independent examiner. And I think it's encouraging that we finally got to this, because it's been long supported locally in Birchington, and again the process has been very long. The only question that I would have, and I don't expect, I understand that it's probably a hard thing for us to solve, but particularly when there are instances like this, maybe potentially in the future, where an independent examiner is delayed in looking into a neighbourhood plan. I mean, the delay with this was considerable, and I know that when we were in administration, we were trying to resolve it with officers, and it then spilled over into this Labour administration as well. So I appreciate it's hard, but I'm just trying to understand, if it does happen again, if there is anything that we can particularly do to try and not necessarily force hands, but get it progressing again, because of course it creates a real level of uncertainty for residents, and there's only so many times you can explain that actually it's not out of our hands and we can't really do anything about it.
I think whenever I've discussed it with officers, the feeling has been that the particular circumstances were unusual. I've not been close enough to it, obviously, because a lot of it went on under the previous administration to know quite what went on. But I know that you obviously had concerns about it when you were running the council, and you know, we wanted to get it complete as well. So I'm glad we've got it to this stage. I don't know that there's anything that officers can offer by way of comments on it. They're not looking very enthusiastic. Mr. Verrill?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a difficult situation. I can't really discuss the personal circumstances of the person involved, obviously. But we did have a number of conversations. He actually attended a session with Birchington Parish Council to try to explain some of the background. And in the end, we did write to the examiner to say that, you know, we had serious concerns about the delay, and the draft report arrived soon after. As the leader's already said, it was somewhat unusual situation we found ourselves in. It's not happened on previous neighbourhood plans. We did have something similar on the local plan examination, where one of the inspectors fell ill, and there was a delay of about 3 months. So, it can happen, but I don't think we could have done much more than we did. But yes, equally glad that we've got to the stage we are at.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that there were a number of other delays to the local plan process rather than inconveniences with the inspector. No. Okay, members, any comment on the Birchington neighbourhood plan? Well, thankfully we've more or less reached the end of the process. It's still got to go to council, and no doubt we'll be doing that in December. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you, and that concludes tonight's meeting. So thank you, members and officers, for your attendance.
Just put your